And then we are going to put this up on YouTube when we are done. So if you are listening, you can access it later, or so can your team. So we are going to kick this off, introduce ourselves. Robert, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first, and then we're going to get into the content.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Robert Gillette. I am an owner cloner. I have a podcast about how to be successful in sales without selling your soul. And I do coaching for businesses that are in the business to business space, usually between 2 and $10 million in revenue, where the owner just has a successful business and they're really happy with it, except that they can't move on to the next thing because they're the only one that can convince a prospect to give them money. And so I help them spin up a sales team that operates independently of the owner's influence or input so that the owner can move on to the next thing. And I do that mostly for outsourced IT support or MSPs.
Awesome. And I'm Jennifer Bleam. It's going to be interesting. We're going to talk in a minute about the overlap between Robert and myself. I work also with MSPs, managed service providers, and managed security service providers, and I help them. Typically, my clients are about $500,000 in revenue, up to about $4 or $5 million in revenue. And I help heavily with sales, but typically in businesses that size, I also uncover some marketing challenges as well. So I help make sure that we have solid marketing systems in place so that the salesperson doesn't have to also do lead gen, because I believe lead gen is primarily the job of marketing. And so that's what I do, everything around the coaching and consulting world for that size company. And I had 2 people reach out to me and say, I'm confused. Robert and Jennifer are both sales trainers. Are you not competitors? And so I want to address that up front. And then Robert, I'll let you weigh in as well. I'm a big believer in relationships and in collaboration. And there are things that Robert does really, really well, like hiring and helping companies hire salespeople, that is not my strong suit. So I will often get leads coming to me saying, can you help me hire a salesperson? And I'm like, I will not, but I know someone who does. And so Robert and I form this very pretty Venn diagram where, yeah, there's a little bit of overlap, because you heard him say that his ideal MSP starts at around 2 million and mine is about $500,000 up to 4. And so there's a little bit of overlap, but there's a whole lot that I do that he doesn't. And there's a whole lot that he does that I do not. And so that is a free lesson for the day, totally off topic. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But again, I'm a big believer in relationships. So that's why we're doing what we're doing here today.
Yeah, and I would actually totally agree with you. It's so amazing how when you have a full pipeline with lots of prospects in it, and you have a network that can reliably bring you referrals and a marketing team that can reliably bring in leads, and when you have a reasonable degree of confidence in your ability to close a new client that is a good fit, it's amazing how many things will come to you that you don't serve, and you are 100% okay giving that to someone else. I call it the brush it off your desk referral. So someone comes to you and says, hey, can you help me with this? And you go, no, I mean, I maybe if I had nothing else to do, but I do have other things to do. And so you just need to kind of brush it off your desk and make sure it goes and lands somewhere safely. And so one of the things that did draw me to you, Jennifer, is one of the number one things people come to me about that I just don't do is when they say, hey, I need to know how to run my business. I need to figure out marketing. I know how to sell enough to get to $500,000 in revenue, but what they really want is to hire a salesperson. And I go, I just don't think you're ready, for lots of different reasons. And I maybe need to send them to someone like Jennifer who can help them get to the point where they have the revenue and the operations to support bringing on a salesperson, because it can be really expensive and risky and embarrassing if you get it wrong, not just to yourself, but to your prospects and to your other employees. It's a big deal. So Jennifer, when you're looking at that MSP that says, I need to grow to the point where I can maybe afford that salesperson, or maybe they say, I just don't want to do sales. It's yucky. I hate it. Like, how are you talking to that person? What are the first things you want to try and tackle with them?
So the first thing I want to tackle is that, especially when you're a little bit smaller, the owner is typically the best salesperson, and that isn't tenable forever. That's why there are people that help fill that need. Okay, what happens when I'm big enough that I can bring on a salesperson? But typically, when you're below a million for sure, and probably even when you're below 2 million in annual revenue, you really aren't ready for a salesperson. You really can't support a salesperson in terms of lead generation and human resources and documentation. And that's one of the big things that I talk to my clients about, is that they're sometimes living in this world where they believe they can just hire a salesperson and that will solve the multitude of business development issues. And man, I'm going to make an absolute statement. I'm going to say it absolutely. Maybe it isn't 100% true, but a lot of
Proverbially true.
times
Proverbially true.
proverbially true. We cannot just throw people at a process problem and expect that person to solve it. Sometimes you get the right person and they can solve it even without a process, but most of the time you need a process in place, and you need a documented, proven process so that you can say, listen, this works, this framework, it works. We have KPIs to prove it. We have maybe sample sales calls to prove it. We know how to overcome common objections. And until you have that, if you bring on a superstar salesperson, the first thing they're going to do is say, show me my playbook, show me my my documentation. And if you don't have those things, then you are not setting up the salesperson for success, which means you're going to churn a salesperson, or you're going to hire the next salesperson and still not be ready and go through multiple hires. Or you're going to hire a salesperson, have to fire them, probably after holding on to them way too long. And then you're going to say, I tried that once, I'm never doing it again. And so that's some of the advice that I give to my clients is, listen, if you want to hire a salesperson, let's get you to the size that you can afford a salesperson. But the way to do that is to get your documentation in place. And while that is happening, which takes some time, you're going to accidentally make some sales, and then you're going to be large enough to be able to afford that salesperson, and you'll have the infrastructure in place to support them properly.
But Jennifer, one might say, can't I just hire a salesperson and then sign up for one of these many fire and forget sales and marketing platforms whose names I won't drop right now, that have really great content and a proven process with KPIs, all that stuff built in? Why can't I just pull that down and pull a salesperson in and just let them run with it?
Yeah, I kind of wish it was that easy. Like, if it was that easy, every MSP would be a $5 to $50 million MSP. And there's so many different ways I could go to answer that particular question. However, I will say it this way. Well, number one, I have a blog out on my website that talks about, how do I know whether my outsourced marketing department is ripping me off or not. It's not exactly phrased like that, but you'll when you go out there, it's probably 5 months ago, and I wrote that blog when I had 2 clients in 3 weeks sign up. They signed up with a marketing company, and then they engaged me. And my first question was, did you sign a contract? Are you sure you signed a contract? Because we all know there's brands out there that they just have a reputation. So anyway, so go read that, learn about what marketing should be doing. But even if that marketing department or that marketing outsourced agency can do what they claim, which most of them cannot, so please check testimonials and Reddit threads and reach out to your colleagues. But even if they could, you're attempting to spin up 2 processes that are very complex at the same time. And I do like running programs and solving problems in parallel, but not those 2. Those 2 are just too big to try to run in parallel. Let's create a lead generation system and bring on our very first salesperson all at the same time. Is not a recipe for success.
How long does it take a salesperson to go from 0 to, a reasonable close ratio, in your opinion?
I like my clients to have 6 to 9 months in the bank. I don't want them to take 9 months to make their first sale. But by the 9-month mark, there should be consistent sales and not just stuff in the pipeline, because often salespeople are really good at selling themselves and selling the owner that their pipeline is full of people that are just going to close tomorrow. They're really, really close to closing. And then the danger is the MSP business owner doesn't want to fire them right before, like, what happens if I fire them and then tomorrow we get 3 closed deals? I would feel horrible. But man, salespeople are really good at overinflating their pipeline. So I like 6 to 9 months of buffer. But let me turn that over to you. What do you usually advise for your clients? Oh, bless you.
Yeah, man, I'm saying it's a year. Not a
Okay.
year till they have their first sale or have a few lucky at bats. It's, you have to invest in a salesperson for a year before you can reliably expect to count on that revenue. And also, you have to understand that MSP sales is seasonal. We don't think it should be, but it totally is.
Yes.
And so you have times of the year that tend to bring in a lot more revenue than others. And you have to work through all of those times because you never know when it's going to pop. But depending on when you hire that person at that 1 year mark, it might look different if it falls in the middle of the summer. So it's kind of interesting how you do that. The other thing that's really tough, and I love that you said, is that a salesperson, always believes in their pipeline very heavily. And I feel that that's one of the challenges people have, is that to be a successful salesperson over a career, you have to be a little bit delusional, like in some way, shape, or form. Like, there's a lot of rejection involved. You have to be optimistic or it will just crush you in general. And so being able to teach a person to suspend that optimism with just a little bit of healthy skepticism so that they can separate their value from the results, so they can project an actual accurate forecast to their operations team. That's a really high level of operational maturity, and it requires not only a very talented and trained salesperson, it requires a management style that allows them to be vulnerable and honest about what's really in their forecast or their pipeline, so that they don't feel like they're auditioning for their job next month every time we talk about work in progress.
Well,
It's
and
it's a two-way street.
yeah, and it's interesting because you want them to be positive and you want them to expect the best. And, I've never talked to a salesperson that, you say, how did the sales call go? Like, we all say, great. It went great. They're going to buy. I mean, 90% of the time we do feel like it went great, especially if we talked way too much. We feel good. We walk out of that sales call feeling heard and feeling validated. And therefore we think it's going to close. But one of the things I go through with my clients is pipeline math. And so let's just pretend that you have a 25% close rate, just because it's easy math. And I'm going to do this with my fingers. Okay. I have 4 deals in my pipeline and I have a 25% close rate. The expectation is that I'm going to close 1. Okay. So this is the one that closes. The problem is when we add another deal to the pipeline, we are still going to project that we're going to close 1 of those 4. But these 3 are dead. These 3, yes, we can keep working them. Yes, we can keep following up on them. But statistically, none of these 3 are going to close. We have to add 4 more in order to close 1. And so that's part of the challenge is understanding pipeline math. Like, okay, when you look at your pipeline and you're like, oh, I closed 1 and I've got 6 more in there, I think I'll close another one of those. Like, you have to be very, very careful that you are always replacing. You were talking about us having robust pipelines. We know that we always have to be replacing, and certainly in my fictitious example, one of these 3 could close. One of those, the deals, just the luck may be on your side, and you may all of a sudden for this quarter you've got a 50% close rate. But always be adding to that pipeline, because that 25% is statistically true. If that's your close rate, those 3 deals aren't going to close. And so sometimes that conversation is challenging to have, because you're working and working and working and following up and following up and following up and burning cycles on deals that are not going to close. They're just not statistically not going
Absolutely.
to close.
Well, and that's also so important when you're talking about an owner positioning themselves to hire a salesperson.
Yes.
Uh, you talk about pipeline math. I talk about just pipeline integrity. This idea of saying, if your close ratio looks better than 25%, you're probably forgetting about all the ones that just you met with and spent time on and they weren't qualified, or you qualified them out, or you lost early in the sales process, and you want to forget about those because you don't want to have a 25% close ratio. And then a lot of the times new salespeople will walk in and they'll be 6 months into it, 9 months into it, and they have an abysmal 2 to 3 to 5% close ratio because there were things that they put on the pipeline that never should have been there, but they
Yes.
either didn't have the skill set or the permission to be vulnerable to say, yeah, this one really shouldn't count. It was a great meeting, great experience, but they're probably not going to buy. Either because they just don't know any better, or because they really need to post up those appointments so that they don't look like they're, bad at their job or whatever it
Mhm.
is, the pressure that the company is putting on them.
So let's shift to hiring a little bit. So that's one of the big things we want to talk about. So hiring, I'm the MSP. I've gotten to that, let's call it $2 million mark. What are some mistakes that you see people at that size make in the hiring process?
Yeah, again, proverbially true. I'm going to lay out some proverbs for you that are not true in all cases all the time, but just things that I've experienced and other people in my profession have experienced. So the first one is we have to come to grips with the fact you're not going to find a good MSP salesperson. You're just not.
Mhm.
They don't exist in the market. If you find someone who has all the skills to do the job, they're not an employee, they're a competitor. They just haven't figured it out yet, and they will, trust me. So you have to be really clear about that. You go to the market not looking for someone who can do the job. You need to go to the market looking for someone who you think you can train or build up or fill in the gaps so they can do the job. That's the first thing. The second thing is you're not hiring a salesperson like Zoom or Salesforce hires a salesperson, someone they can just throw a playbook at and then put them under pressure to hit their numbers. And hey, some people are good at this, some people aren't. If you wash out, that sucks.
Yep.
Um,
And
you don't
by the
have
way,
yeah,
companies like Zoom have like an entire HR department that they can just churn
yeah,
through salesperson after
you don't
salesperson.
have the cash flow to be able to afford that, first of
Yes.
all. Second of all, your brand isn't Zoom. So if you go knocking on the door of a bunch of people and every time they hear from you, there's another sales guy, that doesn't look great for your reputation. You're also going to spend a lot of your time trying to spin up a salesperson that just isn't successful, and you're going to have to do it again and again. So when I tell people to think about hiring a salesperson, you're not hiring just an SDR, although that will probably be the title. What you're really looking for is someone that you can apprentice, someone that you're saying, like, I believe you have the qualities in place to grow up to look a little bit like me. Not all the way like me. You're not looking to create a mini me, but you have to understand, for a salesperson to really take this off of your plate completely so you don't have to do it anymore, you need to find someone who you can build into a professional that can look, sound, sell like a business owner, and you're willing to give the authority to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts on your behalf, and then bring those people in with correctly managed expectations so your service delivery team doesn't fall apart. You're never going to find that person in the market. You have to find someone who you can grow into that person. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. So you said two things I want to park on. So training and helping them grow. So I want to talk about that. And then you used SDR, sales development rep. I want to park there for a minute as well. So training, just to bolt on to what I said earlier, it's too easy for MSPs to say, I'm going to hire someone and they're going to come in, they're going to learn about our value prop, and I'm going to spin the, I'm going to pull the string and then just say, go sell. And then magically the cash register is going to start ringing. You just said training. That sounds an awful lot like effort and work. Like, I can't just expect to find someone, they're a cookie cutter MSP salesperson. So I'm the owner. The salesperson reports to me. How many hours in the first month should I expect to do like one-on-one, not stuff I might have recorded or resources I'm going to have them read books or watch videos, but like one-on-one time with me, the owner.
Yeah, I actually say I think that's the wrong way of thinking about it personally. I think you need to think about, I use the word apprenticeship carefully. Like when you bring on, if you want someone to represent your firm in the market to strangers and have them become clients with correct expectations at the correct price, they need to learn how to look, sound, and act like you. That is not something you do with 1, 2, 5, 10 hours a week. That's something you do by bringing someone into the fold and making them accessible, like making yourself accessible to them. You're going to, through osmosis and training and conversation, like they're gonna have to absorb who you are, your culture, the way you talk, what it is about your clients that people buy from you. Like they trust you for some reason. What is that reason? How can they learn to sound like that and engender that trust? You absolutely need tools. You should get some formal sales training. You should give them finance training. I wouldn't give them too much technical training because that's actually where a lot of sales guys will muck up the whole process. But I remember when I was first selling MSP services almost a decade ago, I remember the CEO and I would have a 1 hour one-on-one on Fridays, and he put it on Fridays because sometimes it would take half a day. It would start at 1 and we would go home at the end of the day when we were done. And he would say, "Hey, Robert, I have a meeting with a business insurance professional on Thursday. I want you in that meeting." And he would schedule 1 hour for us to meet with him in a sales pitch, and then 1 hour for him to explain to me his entire thought process about the business insurance in general, but also how he approached that meeting and when this person said this, here's what I was thinking, so that I could learn to think like a business owner, not just like a salesperson. Yeah, I also took some Sandler training. Yes, I also read sales books and I had to absorb the technical information or the tactical information about sales, but you can't just throw sales training at a salesperson and expect them to sound and act like a business owner.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So you said SDR, sales development rep.
Yeah.
And you say SDR, what do you think? What is that role?
Well, I mean, officially, the SDR, I think, comes from the book Fanatical Prospecting, maybe, which is the story of Salesforce's launch. And they were the first people to really specialize in sales roles instead of having a full cycle salesperson. And it's a lot of it is technical mumbo jumbo. I say SDR because when you put that into Indeed or Glassdoor and people are looking for a job, there's an expectation set around that job role that it's going to be a lot of cold prospecting. You'll be rewarded for setting up appointments that qualify. It's a great place for a salesperson to start because it's an entry. It's a industry-wide, or not even industry. It's like a worldwide acceptance of an entry-level position.
Yes.
And kind of the 80% of what their job will be like is known as an institutional knowledge kind of thing. So that's why I usually throw out that term, even though it's new to MSP owners, but it defines what the first year will look like for this salesperson while they learn everything. It manages expectations well.
I like it. Okay, so I want to pause for just a second because I cannot, we have a couple of Q&A, a couple of questions. So, and by the way, that is exactly what we want. I mean, we can talk for the next, probably 20 minutes or so with that or more without any issues, but we want to make sure this is super valuable for you since you're watching live. So, I know this will be an outlier, but we don't allow any commissioned positions in our company. How would you recommend recruiting for salespeople when commission isn't an option? We offer a company bonus program and employee ownership as primary benefits. Robert, I'm going to toss that one to you. I happen to know this company is a little bit larger. So I'm going to throw that to you and get your opinion.
Well, I don't know who you are or what you're thinking, but I would love to have a half an hour conversation with you about why that is. Because while I don't think a commission solves all problems, in fact, there's a lot of studies that say when someone has a creative role, commissions actually make it harder for them to do their job. But when you're thinking about someone like an SDR or someone who's learning to look, sound, and sell like a business owner, the end version of that is that they are responsible for other people's lives. You have to think about it that way. Like if this person, yeah, let's say I do hire them and they, do the cold calling and all that stuff. And then maybe they learn how to qualify good appointments. And then maybe they learn how to close appointments. And then maybe I can trust them as a VP of sales. That VP of sales holds the livelihood of the rest of your company in their hands. I remember I used to be able to walk around and go, that person works here because I closed this deal. Those two people got their promotion because I closed this deal. That's the attitude you want them to have. Commissions are a baby version of that. And so that's how I think about commissions. I like having financial incentives early on because the worst thing you can do is to fuel a salesperson with fear. And if you take away the carrot, which is a commission, the only thing left is the stick. And the only thing you can do to motivate them is fear of losing their job, fear of losing money or something like that. You have to have some positive carrot for them to chase after. You can call it whatever you want, but it can't just be all stick, or you have someone burning really dirty fuel to try and propel themselves to success.
So in this case, it's an employee-owned company. So the company is owned by, so it's an ESOP. Is the carrot, and I'm asking you because I don't know, is it enough of a carrot to be like, okay, you, the salesperson, are selling, which is causing the company to grow. You're selling profitable deals. Okay, I should say that because that needs to be a KPI. You're selling profitable deals, which is allowing the company to grow and exceed last year's revenue. And so therefore you are going to get more of an ownership interest in a larger company.
That's a wonderful long-term benefit. It is incredibly difficult for a person who gets told no 98% of the time, all day, every day, who's going to lose 80% of their opportunities in a good year, to just deal with that kind of a beating and then only offer them the endorphin hit 3 years in the future. They just need more positive reinforcement in their life. That's what a commission should be doing. It's an attaboy. It's a I'm proud of you. It's a you can hang your hat on the value you've created for us today. It's not a bribe. It's not unfair. Whatever a lot of people feel a lot of different ways about commissions. But if you're going to ask a person to bear more risk than a regular employee, you should be comfortable giving them more reward. And I would tell you that it's very hard to do that job with only a long-term benefit. In the same way, though, it's really hard to do that job if it's only short-term benefit. If the only thing they have in front of them is more commission, at some point they'll earn enough money that commission doesn't motivate them anymore. So you have to give them the long-term benefit as well. But you can't say, hey, work your butt off for the next 2 years, deal with one of the most difficult emotional rejection type of jobs you can experience, and then maybe a year from now we'll give you a good 12% of the profit, just like everybody else here gets. I wouldn't take that job. That's a really hard job to take.
What about straight commission, and not in an employee owned, but just in a general, in an MSP? I see an awful lot of straight commission sales roles, and I have an opinion on that, but I want to get your opinion first.
Great if you're selling candy bars. But what we're asking our salespeople to do is to sit across the table from the managing partner of a law firm, or the administrator of a hospital, or the executive director or board of a nonprofit, and advise them. That's what they're saying. I need help. I'm in pain. I cannot do what I am supposed to do as an employee, and this company cannot do what it is designed and stated purpose because of a technical problem. If you put a person in front of them as an advisor, and the only way they pay their mortgage this month is if that person gives your company money, you will get a lot of bad clients. And you will burn through the exact type of integrity-bound salesperson we all want to be. You have to find that balance between, we want them to be hungry. Like it was explained to me this way. There's a bell curve. Okay. On this side is the guy that is just not worried about his job at all. No commission, no upside. As long as he, shows up for work, he's going to be fine. No one will yell at him. He's not going to earn any extra money, but he won't get in trouble. Comfort on this side. On this side is the commission only salesman. He has to earn money today or he can't put gas in his car to work tomorrow. This person operates in fear. There's comfort and fear. Our job is to take that dead center bell curve and put them a little bit towards the pressure side, because that pressure will propel them forward. But if you put them in too much of a pressure, if their comp plan, if the employee culture, if the management style, if the onboarding type of, if the type of client you're willing to sign, if all of that completes a person who's afraid they're going to lose their job or they're not going to hit their goals, that person will not be successful in the long term. It's all these little levers you can pull on to create what I call aligned incentives. What's good for the client has to be good for the employee, has to be good for the company. And if those are not parallel lines, somebody has to choose when they'll win and when they won't. And that's when you get trouble.
It's interesting. I never thought of it this way, but my very first sales job was straight commission, and we were selling windows and siding. And I lasted for 2 weeks, maybe 10 days, something like that. And the reason I did not stay is that I was in the apprentice role. I was riding along with the senior salesperson. And I distinctly remember we quoted $40,000 worth of windows for this little old lady living in a ramshackle trailer. And I'm telling you, that trailer could not have been worth more than $10,000 or $12,000. And when she said, well, that's an awful lot of money, he said, well, we can finance it for you. And I thought, she is going to be paying for this windows and siding for the rest of her life. And the windows are going to be worth 4 times as much as her dwelling. And that is the environment. I mean, perhaps a little bit extreme, but that's the environment you're creating when it's straight commission. Because if I don't make this sale, whether it's ethical or not, whether it's in the best interest of the client or not, whether it's the best solution for them or not, whether it's the right profit margin for the company or not, I have to make this sale, or I can't feed my family. I can't pay my mortgage. And so that it's a slippery slope. I also feel like the straight commission, to me, when I see a straight commission sales, it, especially in the MSP world, it screams hungry. The MSP owner is hungry, but can't afford a base, which means they really shouldn't be hiring a salesperson.
Or they don't have the confidence that they can make you successful. They're not willing to share in the risk.
Yeah.
They want you to carry it all, which to any millennial and younger, by the way, they are not interested in that.
Yes.
So, but this is one of the reasons why I love having people like you, Jennifer, in my pocket, because people come to me and they say, I want to hire a sales guy because I don't want to do the sales. And I say to them, well, how do you learn to do it now? How successful are you? Do you not want to do it? Or are you just bad at it? You're unsuccessful. And the challenge is that any person that you hire is going to look and sound like you. So if you aren't any good at sales, it's very unlikely that person is going to grow into someone who is, because culture is a downhill. It's a gravity fed thing. So if you as an owner hate sales, if you hate salespeople, if you struggle with sales, if it makes you feel icky, if you've never developed any technical successful talent in this area, that is going to flow downhill. And any person you hire is never going to achieve a level greater than you, which is why so many people under that $2 million mark have to invest in themselves and have to find a way to be the sales expert in their company before hiring one, because you can't just delegate it like you do a system administrator role. So Jennifer, when you're looking at some of these people under $2 million in revenue and these owners that are trying to figure out how they become a successful salesperson, where are you starting them off?
So it depends if they are the right fit for my coaching. So if they're the right fit for my coaching, I talk to them about my coaching and we shift there. If they're newer or smaller, then first of all, I'm advising that they read my book. My book is It's $5. So I don't care how startup mode you're in, you can afford my book. If you can't afford my book, then I would probably send it as a PDF, because even though it is all about cybersecurity sales, it's a great primer on just sales in general. I think I underestimated how many people outside of our industry would say this is the best sales book I've ever read, which was not what I was expecting. I really wrote it for a specific niche. But books, training, YouTube videos, like all those things, coaching, if you're in that, $500,000 to 1 million and you're looking to tip over to that 2 million as quickly as you can, some training and coaching can be super helpful. But you can't hire someone and not train them. You can't hire someone and train them to do something you've never done. So this is a silly, not really thought through example. So we may not be able to take it 100% to the finish line, but some of you know Des. Des used to work for Datto. She now works for DataStream. And she has just recently, like in the last 6 months or so, gotten into baking sourdough. Now, I have watched probably 5 to 10 videos and read a handful of blogs on how to bake sourdough. But it's really overwhelming. I mean, you think it's just baking bread. How hard can it be? It's much more complex than that, because you have to have this starter that lives in your refrigerator, and you have to use a scale like every day to scrape off half the starter, and then you have to feed it with water and flour that you've measured, and it's got to be precise. And
or you could get a dog, whatever.
Yeah, sure. You could. Yeah, because the people name their sourdough starters because they are spending this much time. And even though I've read blogs and I've watched YouTube, like YouTube keeps feeding me all these videos about how to make your sourdough pretty. And I'm like, I'm not even there yet. I just want to make my first loaf. So I approached Des and I'm like, hey, do you ever give lessons? Because there's like some things that are really, really difficult to learn from books. You just got to jump into the sourdough and get your hands dirty. And sales is a lot the same way. Like there's a lot that you can read the books and you can study the books and you can read the blogs. And yes, you should do that. But there is a whole lot of learning you're going to do by just getting into the trenches and doing the thing. And so that's where I would recommend people start if they're not quite at that point of being able to hire, is to do the thing, to document what's working, document what's not working, especially if you're technical. If you're technical, you do this by default with your rollouts and your infrastructure plans. Like you document what went right and what went wrong with a migration or rolling out a new product. Like you're good at documentation. You just never step back from your sales and document the sales side. And so what went well? What did not go well? Where are some things that you picked up on just because you're good at being a human, like you're good at humaning? And if you're going to hire a brand new person who has never done this role before, there may be some opportunities for training there. So realize your shortcomings, and then work to fill those gaps.
I think there's this great concept from the Toyota Way, a book about Lean Six Sigma management called the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. And we as America, we're great at plan and do. Come up with a plan, do the plan. The check step is where the most power is, though. It's the check step is, did I do the plan? And was it a good plan?
Yes.
And then the act is, okay, well, now that I've reviewed the plan and confirmed, did I even do the plan? How do I move forward with the next plan?
Yes.
And that feedback loop in sales, Sandler calls it practice. It's just, you learn a thing, you go practice the thing, and then you review it. How did it go? Did I do it well? We all as salespeople have to pass the sniff test, which is, I think the stats are, might mess this up, but it's 7% of what people hear when we talk is our words. 38% is our tone of voice, maybe our inflection, maybe our rate of talking. And then the remaining 55% is just stuff you have no control over.
Yes.
It's body language and microfacial expressions. And, has anyone ever said something and then like the temperature of the room dropped? That is all that 55%. It's where it all lives. So if you as a business owner walk into the office of another business owner and they're in pain and you're asking them to pay you money and start a new relationship and unseat the vendor they're working with now, or start working with a vendor they've never had a vendor in this space before, you're asking them a lot. You're asking for a lot. And they're going to make that decision. 55% of that decision is just their gut. How
Yes.
do they feel about you? And if the first time you're handling their question is in front of them, you're practicing on them. And I guarantee you, there's data to support this, that something just doesn't smell right.
Yes.
They're in there and it's like you brought something in on your shoe. And the client doesn't know what it is and they can't quantify it, but there's in their tummy, it just does not feel right. And their gut's going to find a reason to disqualify you. And they're going to justify it later with logic. They're going to say it was your price. They're going to say it was your model, or you're not industry specific, or whatever it is that the logic that is attached to that feeling. But realistically, something just smelled off. And what it was is you have not put in the practice.
Yes. And I would argue, and you may disagree with me, that's okay. We're not two people. We're two people. We're not the same person. So I think there is surprisingly little practice that is needed to get you from brand new newbie to above average. Well, then there's a whole lot more practice to get from like above average to stupendous. But I think there is surprisingly little practice needed to simply sharpen the axe.
Pareto actually would agree with you.
Yeah,
Pareto's law, the
80-20.
80-20 rule,
Yes.
You can go from 0 to 80% pretty darn quickly.
Yes.
In fact, it'll only take 20% of the full effort. But to go from 80 to 100, that's 80% or 5 times the effort. And
Yes.
so in my opinion, getting to 80% is table stakes. If I ask you, are you in a one out of 10? Where are you in sales? If you say anything less than an 8, I would say you haven't done your due diligence. You got to be able to comfortably say like,
or when you're interviewing.
I think of it through the lens of somebody has to be the black belt.
Okay.
Somebody's going to walk into a competitive environment with a person who's in pain with money on the line, and you're going to go up against other people who also want that money and that client. Somebody has to be the black belt. Somebody has to know the moves. Somebody has to know how to dodge. Somebody has to have done this enough times that it's instinct, or one of two things is going to happen. You're just not going to be good enough to really play in the game at all. You're going to get disqualified from the tournament, to stretch the metaphor a little bit more. But the other thing that's going to happen is it's not going to serve the person who you're in front of. And realistically, if you win a deal, that's great. You need, this is why you're in the business. You get to do the thing. So I'm not saying that's not good, but realistically, especially if you're dealing with referrals, especially if you work in a small market where everybody kind of knows everybody, if you're smarmy, if you bring that stench, commission breath or whatever you want into that room with you, word gets around and people will stop calling you. You won't even get the at bat. You won't even get to play in the game. If you are just flailing around, not only are you going to lose the opportunity in front of you, you're going to get fewer opportunities. So
Yes.
I would say getting to that 80% is minimum for whoever is the black belt. And if you're less than $2 million in revenue, that's the business owner.
All right. So I'm pausing just for a minute. I know we have a couple more things we want to talk about. I want to check for Q&A. Guys, if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Right now, I'm not seeing any. I'll wait for another second. And then I want to drop a little bit of a, not super controversial, but I want to talk about assessments and tests. So not seeing anybody throwing questions in. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll be ending in about 10 or 12 minutes. But let's talk about assessments. So one of the things, especially there's a couple of sales trainers in our industry that talk heavily about DISC assessments, and whether it's DISC or strength finders or that type of thing. What is your opinion on DISC assessments, or just assessments in general?
So this is tough, and there's again, proverbially true. The challenge with something like DISC or strengths finders or predictive index is that it can be used as a tool to help or hurt. It can be, it's a tool that's used to either confirm our unconscious bias or to help us see our unconscious bias. So in the hiring process, I'm really nervous about it because you'll take a candidate that you don't know enough about and you're looking to shortcut the process of learning about this person by giving them an assessment so you can judge them. That is a terrible way to use any of these tools. And I would maintain the firm position that you will hire the wrong people and hate having done it using the tool that way. But that being said, if I'm looking at selling a prospect, if I'm approaching the office of a stranger, I'm absolutely going to use DISC profiles to try and understand how might this person want to be communicated to? What might they care about based on their role and the handful of pieces of information I can find out? What should be my starting point in trying to communicate a complex problem or solution to this person? Absolutely, I'm going to use DISC, but I use it as a starting point because it's easier to edit than it is to create. And I need to start somewhere. So I'm going to try and start with some assumptions that I can then test. So but I'm not going to use it to go, well, this CFO is definitely a D. And so I'm only going to do this as a D and, stick in my rut on that.
So I was chuckling because a previous position that I was in, we brought in an outside consultant, and four or five of us did a DISC assessment and did not give the trainer, the test giver, any kind of structure. We just said, we want to know what you think, based on this, who would make a good CFO, who would make a good salesperson, et cetera. And so I felt very bad for him after the fact. Thankfully, I wasn't the one in charge of the project. But he looked at me and said, well, she's going to make a terrible salesperson, and turned to the number 2 salesperson and said, he's going to make a terrible salesperson, and then pointed at the customer service rep and said, she's your salesperson. And she's like, I don't want to sell. I hate sales. And I'm just like, okay, you just managed to tick off 3 people. Very nicely done.
And by the way, your crystal ball's a little foggy.
Yeah.
Because it's a great starting point. They're great tools for increasing communication. They're great tools for helping you understand other people you're already invested in. But the worst thing you could do is go, well, I'm bringing in this candidate, but before I interview them, they're going to take the Myers-Briggs. And if they're the wrong Myers-Briggs type, they don't get to do an interview.
Yes.
That is the absolute wrong way to use it.
Yep. All right. So someone is picking up on a term that you used, apprentice. So if we're talking to someone who's an owner, they are at the point that they're ready to hire. They're like, where do we look for this apprentice? Indeed, LinkedIn, like where do we look? And then how do we measure these candidates? What are some easy ways to measure their potential?
The first one is easy to answer. The second part is not. The first part is, I would say try and find your apprentice the same way you would hire a coach or a mentor. You're not just going to go on Google and try and find a personal mentor or someone to apprentice you. Like you're not going to do that. What you're going to do is you're probably going to start with your closest circle of friends, and you're going to be vulnerable and say, hey, my current advisors, I need an advisor in this area. And if they don't have anyone, maybe you'll go one circle broader. Well, who are the people you trust that I can ask? Maybe if you can't find someone there, maybe you'll go to your employees. Say, hey, does anyone know? And if you can't find that, maybe you'll go to some industry contacts or competitors. And then maybe another circle broader and another circle broader. And if you run out of everything else, maybe then you'll put something on monster.com or Indeed or Glassdoor just to throw a net as wide as you can. Now, you have to understand people want to apply to jobs that way because it's really easy. The commitment's low, and they can go click, 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 and apply to 15 jobs on a Friday when they're pissed at their boss. But then Monday rolls around and now they're not responding to your emails, and you just have to understand that. So I would say if you're going to look for someone in that series of a role, start with your circles on the inside and expect it to take time. It's not something you're going to knock out in 3 weeks. If you want to go on this journey, it's incredibly important you find the right candidate. Now, the right candidate. Yes. This is the tough part.
Yes.
The very first step with one of my clients in helping them figure out what to even look for is I go core values. I just
Mhm.
like, do you have core values you actually believe in as a company, as a person? Like, and if you don't, I can help you test some. I believe I've got the 5 that I think are most important to me. But even if you hired me, I'm going to make you come up with 3 more. And then what's going to happen is we're going to find a way to test for those core values in an interview. And if at the end of that interview, when we're going over the report card, we have not found historical evidence of those core values, they cannot move to the next interview.
Interesting.
That's where I start, because you got to understand, I can teach a person to sell. We can get you a book and walk you through the book and do the practice. What I can't do is teach a person to have a core value of integrity or lifelong learner or whatever it is that's important to you as a person, because you're going to have to carry that person along through the first year and afterwards. You're going to have to care about this person. You're going to have to want them to succeed, even if that costs you extra time, money, and freedom. Like, it has to be something you're invested in. So I always start with core values.
I
That's
love
where I
that
begin.
because the lack of core values is what is going to get under your skin as the owner and
Yeah, I
keep
wouldn't
you
say
up at
lack. I would
night.
say misalignment of core values, because
Yes,
everybody
yes.
has core values.
I mean, if they
Yeah.
lack the core, like one of your
Yeah.
key
You
core
have to, what's good for
values.
them has to be good for you. What's
Yes,
good for the client. Like, it
yes,
has to be that alignment. And so if you turns out like to you, you think competitiveness is really stinking important, and they have not shown any evidence in their entire life of being competitive, that's going to be really hard for you as their mentor.
yes. I
So
love
I
that.
hope that answers the question.
I think it did. Otherwise, if it did not, please drop it in the Q&A again or ask it a different way or at a deeper level, and we'll answer it because we've got just a couple of minutes. So I love it. Okay, so indeed, circle of influence and then outer circle of influence. And then if you need to post a job, and then the bare minimum would be cultural fit, which incidentally is something that many of my clients are doing with clients. Like, don't bring on a client who is not a cultural fit. Not that they have to exhibit 100% of your core values, but there should be some type of a cultural fit there as well.
Yeah.
So I love it. Okay. Oh, question just popped up. Hold on. Okay. Outside of hiring a full-time person, have you ever seen fractional chief revenue officer, fractional VP of sales, or a fractional SDR be effective? And then if you have seen that, what did they do to be successful?
Oof, that's a tough one, because I know some guys that run those kinds of businesses that I really love. That's not my line of work, and I don't want to disparage anyone. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and I got a really good hammer. So I can't tell you whether they work or not. I can tell you my own personal belief in this is that, again, let's imagine you get hired by $1 million MSP. You're making $65K a year with an on target earnings of $100K. So 10% of the entire top line revenue of a company. I want you to explain to me the scenario in which that person cares more about the success of that business than the owner. Explain to me the scenario in which they are better prepared to fine tune a complex solution for a prospect than the owner. I want you to explain to me how they are going to fight for the appropriate onboarding of that client more than the business owner. The reality that we have is that no one is going to care as much, work as hard, learn as fast, or be as committed to doing it correctly on the first try than the business owner. So in my opinion, that business owner, if you are a business owner with $500,000 in revenue and you want to hire salespeople, you need to be fiercely committed to a 40-hour-a-week sales job until you're at $2 million in revenue and you know how to do it. And then you can partner with someone like me or do it yourself, spinning up a team to replace you. It's very hard. I think so. When I think of like fractional VP of sales, or outsourced cold calling or something like that, I'm not saying it can't work. It's hard for me to envision a long-term strategy of success. I think it can be a great stopgap to stop a crashing plane, but it is not a long-term solution, in my personal opinion, having never run one of those businesses.
Yes. I have sometimes kicked around for a couple of my clients, them hiring a part-time salesperson. Let's say someone who doesn't want a full-time job. Like, let's say they're a stay-at-home mom, or they're a mom, but they drop off their kids at 9 a.m. and they have to pick up their kids again at 2 p.m. and they're great salespeople, but they don't want to work 40, 50 hours a week. Is there a marketplace for part-time salespeople? I don't have that model fleshed out, but the one thing that I heard, Robert, is like there is again, a proverb that you can't serve two masters. And so to me, a outsourced CRO that is serving 5 masters is very different than a part-time, in my example, mom, who that is her only job. It's just that she doesn't want to do it 40 hours a week. Those are, on paper, they look very similar, but I think emotionally and intellectually, they're very different.
Yeah, I would approach it like this. There's training, consulting, and coaching. Okay. Someone can train you to hold the football. Someone can train you how to run a screen pass. And I'm football parlances, please forgive me if you're not a football person. And I know it's gender specific a lot of the times, but anyways, someone can teach you to hold up the football, how to throw it, how to run a pass, how to scramble out of the pocket. A coach can look at you and go, hey, I've watched you do that training, and this is where you can improve. This is how you can make it better. This is where you're falling short. A consultant can tell you, I know how to win a football game. Do this, this, and this, you'll win the football game. At no point can any of those people hold the football for you, make the pass, win the touchdown, and win the game. That's not what outside help is meant to do. And in my opinion, the moment your coach, consultant, or trainer steps in and does it for you, you're no longer playing the game. And I just don't know how one achieves this hard thing when they can always, if they know in their heart and head, they can tap out and have someone else do it. I just don't know how that gets done.
I love it. Okay, we just had someone say they had to bounce, and I looked at the clock. We are right
And it
at
is
the
noon.
top
Boom.
of the hour.
Fill the whole hour. What a shocker.
Shocking. You get 2 salespeople on the phone and they can talk. So I love it. Any next steps or takeaways that you want to share with people that are still able to be on the call?
Yeah, I think you had something you're going to send out. I think you're going to receive an email from both of us. I think that this is one of these things that just can't be solved, or if you still have questions, which I suspect you do, or you want to continue the conversation, I think Jennifer and I can both commit to not doing a hard sale process. I'm willing to donate a little more of my time to work through a specific option. I get my value from helping people solve their problems. I'm really lucky that some people are willing to pay me for that. I feel like Jennifer is in the same boat. So if you have questions, if you want to continue the conversation, we're both going to email you, spend some time on our calendars, and let's just help you in any way we can.
I love it. That's a perfect way to end. Robert, thank you for your time, and for everybody that is still watching. Thank you so much for your time. We'll get this recording up onto YouTube and share that YouTube link with you. You'll get an email from us over the next several days. Give us a bit of time to bundle things up. And then, like Robert said, if we can support in any way, talk through things, act as a sounding board, please let us know. That's where both of us get a lot of our joy, a lot of our juice. So let us help, let us support. And I'm going to wrap us up for today. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.